Here we are. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first meeting of 2020 for the Port of Bellingham. I'd like to start off with recognizing we're on the traditional territory of the Coast Salish peoples, including the Lummi and Nooksack nations. Start with roll call. Commissioner Bell.
Present.
Commissioner Briscoe.
Present.
And Commissioner Shepard is also here. I don't have to gavel that. I know. We're all in new seats, as you can see. We have, for this year, we have new assignments for President, Vice President, and Secretary. This year, I'm President. Commissioner Briscoe is Vice President. Commissioner Bell is Secretary. So that's why we're not in our usual and accustomed seats. Again, all getting used to our new roles. Before we start with public comment, Commissioner Briscoe wanted to mention his what happened over break for him and update everyone on his swearing in. Yes.
Yeah, generally, we're sworn in the first meeting when you're newly elected. There's three ways to do that. I can either go to the auditor's office and do it. The auditor can come here, or I can have a notary public do it. Carrie is that person. So on December 30th, I came to the port office. I was sworn in by Carrie Jones, our executive secretary, upstairs. Raised my hand, swore the oath, and signed the paper. I'd just like to make that part of the record for this meeting so that everyone knows that things were done properly. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'd like to congratulate Commissioner Briscoe on his reelection and all of the others throughout Whatcom County who are serving public office in newly elected and or newly appointed. We just had someone get newly appointed yesterday. We'll start with public comment. We have no one signed up. Is there anyone here who would like to speak? No? We are starting our meeting 30 minutes early. We're starting at 4 o'clock this year, and we will continue to have public comment at the start of the meeting and then at 5:30 as well. So we'll take breaks at both those times. With no public comment, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Carrie, if you please.
A motion to approve consent agenda items A through F.
Any questions?
I have none. I have none.
I have none.
Okay. Go ahead.
A motion to approve consent agenda items A through F.
Commissioner Briscoe.
Yes.
Commissioner Bell?
Yes.
And Commissioner Shepard is yes as well. Passes 3-0. Moving right along, we have our first presentation.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Don Goldberg, Director of Economic Development. It's a pleasure to be here in 2020, start the year. Thank you, Jennifer. And I want to thank my good staff. No. So today, as you can see, we're here to present to you the highlights of what we were doing, the team, last year for 2019, some of our deliverables that we've done, and then what our plans are as we move forward. So as you know, you're very aware of our 4 team members. Jennifer Novak was just promoted last month to our Research and Communication Manager. She deserves that. And then some. Jennifer has taken on a lot of roles and brought that position up to a much higher standard, and we're very appreciative of her. So our 4 people are very diverse, and we have an incredibly powerful team, and I'm quite excited that where we stand right now. So a little short, brief history of time, as Stephen Hawkins might say. This is the last 24-month timeline of our organization. You know, we started approximately 2 years ago this week. Then we started building our partnerships. We started to assemble a team. If you recall, John Mitchner was the only member of the team when I started. We created a strategy for economic development for the region. Then we started bringing in broadband strategy, opportunity zones. We did a bunch of studies this year, Cherry Point, the I-5 corridor study. We started getting very heavily involved in housing crisis and daycare because it affects our employees, so employers. And we found that even though we're not daycare and housing specialists, we need to become them because it's dramatically affecting the economy here. And then we started working on Western Crossing, and we're successful in moving forward a new plan on P3 with the help of Western and other members of the port. We had the first business continuity workshop that the governor came to. And as the last one, we're still addressing daycare shortage. Most recently, one of the major daycare organizations is looking at closing down. That would be 500 children that would not have a place to go. We estimate we're about 4,000 slots short right now. So these are some of the histories of what we've been doing. You can see here we have rural broadband, Cherry Point, and a bunch of these things. We're going to be going through each one of these quickly. So rural broadband, as you know, Gina Stark has taken this on as the program manager. Gina didn't have broadband background a year ago. She's done an incredible job. It's very complex. There's 4 different agencies involved. We've been successful at getting both EDI funding and CURB grants. So she's done a great job, and we still plan on rolling out our first phase by the end of this year. Cherry Point. Cherry Point was one of our studies that the county funded. I made a presentation approximately 6 months ago on it. We still believe that the Cherry Point area is an incredible resource. The Lummi tribe came and made comments as to their feelings about the region and some of the ownership. So our goal is to figure out how to bring the Lummis with the private sector together to find a solution that works for everybody. Industrial and commercial lots, we're working a lot on trying to bring in quality developments here. Last year, you gave me $25,000 to move forward on designing a lot out by the airport for an industrial site. What you see here is the proposed elevation and building site plan. It's approximately 35,000-foot building. I have a large development company that is looking at it right now and may have some interest in developing it. This site's on the corner, Lot 4, in front of Woodstone Pizza on the other corner. We have also designed 2 buildings with that same funding, so I was able to stretch that funding to do 3 building designs. One of our projects that we're just finishing up now is, Jennifer Novik's leading this, is the I-5 corridor study that brings in a study of industrial and residential properties along the I-5, and we've also expanded that down the Guide Meridian to Linden. This is the first time that GIS has been implemented throughout the county on the I-5 corridor. We have all the major properties embedded in GIS now. What this will allow us to do is it'll allow each city to plan better, but it'll allow the cities and the counties to work together and know where their utility lines are, where the best properties are that are associated with their borders. It'll be the first time that the entire county on I-5 will know what the other one is doing, and it allows them the opportunity to plan together.
Don? Excuse me, Don?
Don?
Yeah.
On your ranking and the colors there, could you explain that ranking?
Sure. So one of the attributes of this GIS layering is that we're able to take, so the color blue, the blue is the least likely to be developed. Yellow is the highest, and pink is in the center. So you see all that blue there, and that means that that property is very difficult and unlikely to develop.
Okay.
We're able then, on the next slide, to say, what if we put utilities into that region? What effect would it have? Well, in this case, it moved all the blue almost into pink, meaning that it's developable, and some of them became yellow, meaning it would be very easy to develop. So the cities and the county, as well as we, will be able to go in there and say, well, if this sewer line went in there, if we put in more power, or this road was expanded, what effect would that have on the entire region for development, rather than just a specific site?
So one more question, where the colored ends on the map you have here, where would that be in representation, like the Hannigan or the Hannigan Road or so? Are we east of the Hannigan with that, or is that still?
I don't understand, Bobby.
Where we're going to the border,
Uh-huh.
how far east does that color represent? Where does that basically stop? And is that just at Linden or east of Linden, or does it go to Nooksack, or?
Well, I think Linden is south east of that, so this is within the city of Blaine city limits. So our study was Blaine, the county as it went down I-5, then Ferndale, the county as it went to Bellingham, and then up the road to Linden on the Guide Meridian.
Okay,
So this is only Blaine right
So that
here.
basically stops at the Guide Meridian is where it stops.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Business resiliency, you've probably heard us a number of times talking about this. We live in an area that has potential for a lot of natural disasters. We all talk about the big one, but there's everything from oil spills to fires to many things that can happen. And there are a number of organizations that are working on the physical aspect of what do you do in that crisis. But up until recently, nobody has talked about what's the economic impact and the recovery process. And there's a lot of studies that show, in particular cities of our nature, that if you had a major disaster and didn't have an economic recovery plan in sight, that those companies would not come back and rebuild here. So we had our first resiliency workshop. The governor attended it for a short period of time and made a speech. He was very, very positive about what we were doing. We now are going to start working on working with companies directly on teaching them how to build a resiliency plan, and then we're going to be having workshops for them, and then we'll be going into building an economic resiliency plan for the port. Western Crossing, I mentioned earlier. Western Crossing had some great intentions initially when it was designed, but it was probably designed a little too early for the realities of what's going on. So a number of us, as you've seen in past presentations, got together and started working with Western on what it could look like if it was refreshed and new. And so we've all landed on this P3 model where a potential campus could be built that was private sector with public sector and higher ed. And that is moving very quickly right now. I'm working with quite a number of companies. Western is working with some as well. They're also looking internally at some of their degrees. So I would be surprised if something didn't happen this year where we got clarity on a real Western campus.
Just a real quick update on that.
Yeah.
The number of people that you have looking at this site or this concept, is it pretty broad? I mean, we've done a lot of looking around to see who would be interested. If you elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah, Commissioner Bell. So right now we're working with everybody from high-tech companies in the marine tech industry to energy cluster companies. We're working with local companies for expansion. And then we're also working with some government lab type companies like PNWL and other institutions that are kind of in between being private sector, nonprofit, and government, that they support the federal government in energy and technology. So it's quite diverse. Executive Director Fix and I met yesterday with Skagit County and a boat designer that has a lot of interest in working with one of the private sector engineering companies to build a new vessel that might be put together here. So there's a lot of real interest in this, and a group of us will be going up to Surrey, where they're building a 1 million square foot large campus innovation with Simon Fraser, and we're going to be meeting with the developers to get an idea of how they put it together, what were their obstacles, how did they make it all work. So a lot of exciting things. This is my background, and I'm super excited about it.
So, Don, is that going to go out for a public RFP, or what do you think the next steps are for how people get involved? Is the process just ongoing, and if firms or partners are interested, should they contact now, or is this going to be announced as a formal process?
Well, I would definitely say that any companies, private sector, public sector, nonprofit, that are interested in being on the campus should contact us so that we know they're around and that we can facilitate their needs. In terms of the development itself, I don't think we're at that point yet. We're have ongoing Western Crossing meetings coming up, and I think as we get a little bit more clarity, the next step will be to create an RFPS to go to the public and see, what the large development companies that have done this before, what they can bring to the picture.
One question, Don.
Yeah.
So have we done any kind of outreach to companies through, I don't know, internet process or whatever, just to get ideas, or are we just kind of word of mouth locally? What are we?
No, I'm part of my trip to Norway was for that purpose, which I've connected a number of those companies to All American. Okay. I'm still reaching out to quite a number of them. Okay. So we're an ongoing. We're constantly looking for more of these companies because we have to get some numbers together in order to accommodate the development. But we wouldn't be able to sell the actual development yet until we know what we're developing, where it's going to be.
Oh, I understand.
All of those things. So it's a concept that I'm selling right now.
Right. So you're reaching out internationally, basically, for all ideas.
Very good. We're meeting with companies in Vancouver. We're meeting with developers in Vancouver that have interests, things of that nature.
Thank you.
We also believe that this is a regional economy, and the region expands from the south all the way to north of us. So we are quarterly meeting with Skagit County's EDAS, and we've also met a number of times with Surrey Economic Development Agency, and John Michener is the first American to be on the Surrey Board of Trade. That would be like a Canadian coming down here and being on the board of our chamber. So he is very respected up there and has been going up there, and they signed him into being a board member. So we're really starting to open our borders and realize that there are things in each part of these communities that together we're much more powerful. We rebranded ourselves. We've been talking about this. Every once in a while we call ourselves REP. REP is the same thing as an EDC, but it stands for Economic Development Partnership. And we believe that partners are the answer and the solution to a lot of what we do. We are 4 strong, but we can't do it all, so we're heavily involved in many things. We sponsor a lot of events. We're, for 4 people, you see us all around. So we now have a new logo, and we call ourselves REP. These are just... Hats are coming. No. That's a good idea. This is just the majority of the organizations that we're partnering with locally. So you can see the diversity. You know, we always hate to put them up there because for sure we've missed some, but it gives you an idea of how integrated we are in the community now. These are the boards and committees that our team are on. And we're active on these boards and committees. We're not just there to have our name. So recently, the Washington Maritime Blue Committee, which is a governor committee, I've joined that. Gina's on the Housing Alliance. Both Gina and I are on Technology Alliance. We facilitate and house Team Whatcom and all of these others. And you all know that we put together and facilitate the Whatcom County Business and Commerce Committee, and we're having our first quarterly meeting next week, and we're hoping to bring that committee to another higher level. This is what everybody wants to hear. I had to put you through the other stuff to get to here. So, you know, everybody wants to know about deliverables. Everybody wants to know about jobs. What are you really doing? So, when I started Family Care Network, I had a little office in Birch Bay. Blaine's 2 doctors were retiring. They came to me and they said, "We don't know what we're going to do. We have no doctors." In many terms, economic development would say, well, you know, good luck. But how do you have quality of life? And economic development has to work with quality of life. So we worked for a year and a half, and Blaine is now going to have a full-size clinic from Family Care Network. Silfab, which was iTech, about 6 months ago, doubled their facility in their capability. Recently, I worked with Commerce in the governor's office, and we just received a notice that they were awarded a $250,000 grant by the governor. It's the first one done of the year. It's about 1/10 of the entire budget, and Silfab is planning on doing another expansion. Tidal Vision is a company that John has been working with for a long time. He gave them one of our small loans. They used that loan, which they're still doing. Now they're on fire. They've been funded with a lot of money. They just got another building. They're expanding, hiring more people. NutriDrive is another similar story. John's been working with them for a long time. We went and met with them, and they were talking about leaving. They, for the same reasons that we've heard others. They can't find housing. They can't find daycare. There's no space. And while we were with them, we started talking to them about some large buildings that were available. And they're in the process of moving to one of those buildings, which is, I'm guessing, about 4 times the size of their building. So instead of leaving, they're quadrupling their size. 360 Modular, about a year ago, I told you how we successfully were able to deliver this project, but I was about a year early. This project, 360 Modular, is a partnership between a Canadian 2 guys and an American. They are fully under construction now in Ferndale in a 60,000-foot building. They're going to be the first, similar to Method Homes, but they are going to be a commercial builder of commercial properties on a prefab basis. Their prefab construction quality is at or above any custom home or custom project, and they're able to do it in a dry environment all year round at about half the price. And we've already connected them to 3 or 4 projects in town. They expect, and they're talking about having daycare on campus potentially. They're investing millions of dollars, and they expect in the next year or 2 to have as many as 100 employees. And then the No Meat Factory is this German company that is in Vancouver. Been working with them for about a year. They've come and gone. They've leased 25,000 out of a 75,000-foot building in Linden, and they are a company that makes vegan products. And they have done it many times, and they've had to wait because of a non-competition clause. He's all in, and he expects in the next 3 years to grow to 200,000 to 300,000 square feet and have 200 to 300 employees. So those are some of the ones that are actually in place and going, and we have quite a number more that we're working on.
Can we back up to the Tidal Vision?
It's number 3
Back
there.
up to the Tidal Vision expansion. I was writing, maybe I missed your explanation on that one. Could you re-explain that one for me?
Yeah, they manufacture a product that is, John could probably explain it a lot better, but it's a natural product that can be used in stormwater to cleanse it without going through filtration systems. So it's cheaper, it's cleaner, it's natural, and they've created a new way of doing it. And so the potential for this company is enormous, and they have quite a number of large investors that are putting money into them. And they have just leased, I think, 50,000 square feet now.
So this product will take the place of,
It can take the place of like a potential storm.
we've had to do like at the shipping terminal, we had to create that, I forget what it's
Yeah,
called.
why don't I let John tell you real quick about them, because it's a very different, interesting product.
Yeah, John Mitchner, Economic Development Program Manager. Thank you, Commissioner. Yeah, Tidal Vision, these guys actually started up in Juneau, and their first product was creating a clean way, green way to make leather out of salmon skins from the waste product from the salmon processors up there.
Familiar with that, yeah.
They took that concept and said, well, what else can we do with the waste product from the seafood industry? So they found that they, on their own, developed a way to make chitin that comes from king crab shells. So they partnered with Trident Seafoods for the supply of the shells. Chitin is turned into a thing called chitosan, which is a liquid. It's made a lot in China, but they use a very toxic, harsh chemicals to do it. These guys have found a green closed loop system where there's nothing harsh about it at all. In addition to then treating stormwater, they estimated they treated close to 200 million gallons up in BC last year with the Public Works Department up there, and that's just a small piece of what they're going to be able to do. You can also use chitosan to treat cloth. So it's antibacterial, antimicrobial on cloth. So the auto industry is interested in treating shoddy fiber with it. That goes between your car door and your car panels. It's filled with shoddy fiber, and you don't want that to mold or rot, so you treat it with a chemical. Currently, it's a toxic chemical that's used. This is a non-toxic solution to it. The problem that they've run into is that chitosan has been listed as an environmentally dangerous chemical on the EPA's list. The ironic thing to that is that chitosan has been approved by the FDA. You can use it to clarify beer, swimming pools. You can spray it on game meat to keep it from going bad. You can spray it in your mouth. It's fine. So there's all these different uses, but they literally have spent the last year and a half, 2 years, going through an act of Congress, a literal act of Congress to get this removed from this EPA dangerous chemical list. Once that happens, which should be happening, well, we've been saying any time now for the last year or so, but it is happening. That will allow them to then start selling the product into the automobile industry of the United States, in addition to the stormwater systems that are coming online. They partner with a company out of Everett, that's Water Tectonics, I believe they're called. And they're the ones that would buy the product from Tidal Vision, and then they implement the solutions to whatever the project might be, from small scale up to very large scale operations.
Thank you, John.
You're very welcome.
Questions? Don, you mentioned for the 360 module, they make commercial
They'll be
buildings, but-
making hotels, office buildings, things of that nature out of prefab construction methods.
And what's the worker housing possibility?
For a couple of things. They're looking at the potential of having worker housing on campus for themselves to start out, along with daycare, because they know that those are the things that are missing for workers. They're also looking to work with BTC on a plan to have students come over, and one of the things that they would do is potentially build low-income housing or something to teach the students how to build, and then they might even get a job afterwards at the plant, and the practice would be to build facilities, potentially low-income housing.
Thank you.
And then just a couple of quick things. We report quarterly to State Commerce Division. We have to do these, kind of boring number reports out on how many people we contact, how many companies, how many contact us. So these are our ADO deliverable numbers for last year. And then the number I think that is really impressive is that we made more than 2,500 contacts, the four of us last year, either through email, in-person, phone, with different organizations and companies. And then the last slide being what's next. What are we doing this year? As you can see, we're a very busy group. One of the biggest projects we're going to have coming up is every 5 years there's a new SEDS requirement by the federal government. That's the County Economic Development Strategy Report. For the first time, we're going to be responsible for writing that. So we're going to be taking that on this year. We're going to continue our partnership building. We're going to start to accelerate our resiliency plans for private sector and the public sector. We're going to continue working on daycare and housing because of its importance. We want to expand and improve our relationship with the tribes. We're going to continue to try to increase the level of high-quality jobs. And then we're going to start our broadband and utility studies and implement, finally, hopefully, a good P3 model on Western Crossing. And that's it. Any questions?
Great, thank you very much. Questions or comments?
I have a question, Don. As we grow with this and as your lead staff gets more involved personally with doing things, do we have enough support staff to make this go right? Because you can't do everything by yourself. Mm-hmm. And we've been growing very rapidly. We have a lot of big projects you've just explained. Do you feel that your division is I guess I would call it junior staffed properly to support the?
Yeah, well, one of my problems, and I'm fortunate that I have 3 other people that have the same problem, we're kind of deal junkies. So it's very hard to say no. And so many of these things are interwoven. You can't, part of what I saw when I came here was that we just the region didn't have good foundation built. And so our house was kind of wobbling all the time. So this last 2 years, we've spent most of our time building a really strong foundation, and now we find ourselves in the implementation period, which you're right, that's going to take a lot of work and a lot of time. We're all hoping that we can do it. We're trying to be very mindful of the public's money, staff, keeping a small team busy rather than a big team that can't, doesn't have that much to do. So I've said to others, we're starting to make some of our meetings not as often, shorter, more purposeful as we start to move forward. And we're going to have to watch that we don't take on too much more.
And that's my concern as fast as our area is growing, as many things that are on the plate, is that people become overwhelmed and we don't do good at everything. We do good at some things, but we don't do good at everything. So this commissioner would certainly like to hear if an issue arises where the plate gets too full and things are spilling over the sides, because what you're doing is very important to this entire county as well as our neighbors to the south and the north. And I certainly want to do it right, and the way you do it right is you have the proper staff involved. And I think you've done an exemplary job, all of you, to this point. And to keep doing that, if you need help, I would like to hear about that so we can help get that help for you.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, Commissioner. At this point, I think we're good. There's storms, and sometimes it comes at us, and then we have to buckle up and deal with it, and then readjust. But I think where we're at right now, some of the things we have to remember is that we're heavily involved in housing and daycare, but we're not housing and daycare specialists. So I want it always to relate back to economic development, housing and daycare. There are other entities out there that can deal with the other aspects of that. So it's always trying to stay in our groove,
Thank you.
Just wondering if you consider our groove to be pushing the county and the city into accommodating us when we do have projects that we need to move forward, that they understand their role in delaying or slowing down or maybe getting in the way of progress at times. And I think we've seen that a couple of times over the last year where we've had a couple of instances where recommendations were sidelined for another opportunity or permitting was slowed down. I just want to make sure that we're on a proper footing when we're discussing this with our counterparts at the county and at the city, and that we have a strategy for communicating that effectively.
Thank you, Commissioner. So I make it part of my responsibility to meet with all the other public officials. And so I've already met with a number of the new city council members as well as the mayor. I've already sat down with Sat Paul. And we'll be making this presentation in an expanded version in the 2 weeks to the county council, and following that with the cities as well. And of course, we're not only Bellingham and Whatcom County, so I'm also going to be rolling this out to the other cities. And we've had a couple of the small cities now follow up on one of the business and commerce housing letters, and they've asked me to consider working with them to hire a consultant to review their planning process. So it's actually happening, the thing behind the scenes, and there's 2 cities that have asked for it already, and I feel like the others will follow, and that I've also discussed it with county exec as to the potential county doing it. So, yeah, my role is to put pressure on them without getting thrown out the door.
Well, if they throw you out the door, let us know.
I guess the last thing is, how'd you get that new logo again?
Jen designed it.
Yeah. Huh.
No, we thought,
Well done.
rep is easy to say, and it really is what we're about. We could not do this without our partners.
I just wanted to see Rob smile.
In-house work, you can beat that.
She's available for pay for another logo.
Well, thank you guys for all the work you guys continue to do. You're a great team. I continue to hear how well respected you are as a team, and you end up being one of the more public-facing entities of the Port of Bellingham. And you guys are all over the county and beyond. And quite frankly, you make us look good. So thank you for the work, and we appreciate it. And I know that you get a lot of recognition and just notice from the rest of the people in the region. So thanks for that. I've got 2 questions. One, we mentioned the loan fund and the revolving loan fund. How are we doing on the size capacity there? We had discussed previously potential for increasing those loans or the amount of funds there.
Yes, Commissioner. We currently have money to lend. We're in a pretty good, we're actually in a great place. We've worked with the EPA or the EDA in Seattle. For a while, we were being penalized for the way the loan fund worked. We would have too much in the bank because it was this big kind of a roller coaster. We now have it so we can have more money in the bank for a longer period of time, so we're not rushing out there to make loans if we need to. That being said, we do have money in the bank now to lend, and I've reached out to a number of businesses that were inquired last spring, and we're looking at doing that. One of the things the EDA has said is we need to demonstrate need in order to capitalize the fund, and thus far we haven't really been able to do that, and that's part of is due to the fact that it's such a small fund. It's sort of a catch-22 that we're dealing with there, but it is on top of mind. And if we can get one more loan out the door, then we're quite at that point we're loaned out again. We're very close to it anyway. Barring any of the current loan clients paying us back, which has happened in the past too, or they'll they get successful, and then banks like them, and then they get funding, and we get taken out, which is what the program is designed to do. When that happens, then we get a bunch more money in the bank, and so we have to push it again. So that all being said, it is something we're looking at going forward and working with the folks in Seattle to see what recapitalizing the fund would look like. But we're not quite there yet where we have the need to demonstrate where we can make a strong case.
Okay,
But the program is alive and well and doing great, yes.
great. All right, thanks.
You're welcome.
And last question, Dawn, you know, I see many of our businesses are busy right now. Our relative unemployment is quite low. We continue to see wages not increasing a lot. Is that what you're seeing as well? And how do we address this continued inequality between wages not moving well and other costs of living, housing, childcare, other things keep going up? And I kind of see we have two levers. We can address housing costs and housing availability, childcare. I don't think we can really control the cost of milk, but we can address some of those macro level costs that people have in their budget. And we can also try and address the quantity and the quality and the compensation that jobs come with. How are we doing with that balance?
Yeah, well, I mean, as a state, the state is probably one of the more progressive states in the country in terms of doing it. The national minimum wage, I think, is still at $7.25 and hasn't been increased since 2009. And we're at 13.25 or something right now. So, and moving up to 15. But $15 an hour equates to a $30,000 a year job. If you have one child in daycare, that's $1,500 a month. That doesn't work out. I wish, you know, the things we're trying to do that we can influence is to find housing areas that might be more affordable to develop and find developers to develop an affordable product. Potentially having the public put some of that infrastructure in to make it more affordable. But where we can have a real influence is to try to replace some of the $15 an hour jobs with $30 an hour jobs. Western Crossing's whole concept is to do that. You know, it's not just to fill up the waterfront; it's to hire and train the people that will get better paying jobs. We are a manufacturing region, and so we continue to have a lot of manufacturing jobs, and that worked out when there were $150,000 houses here. I think that some of it is the answer is not clear. If I had that answer, I'd probably be doing something different. But I think there are steps towards it, and some of those, like for instance, daycare. A lot of countries start their public education at 3 years old, and daycare is part of like kindergarten. When we started kindergarten through 12, we were a traditional society where the husband went to work and the mother stayed home, and there were all these different things than there are today. Should we be looking at having children go to school earlier in public school? So there are a lot of different things that we're throwing around, but the effect that I think our group can have is to just bring better jobs in.
Okay. Thank you. Well, thanks again for the work, and we really appreciate it.
You're very welcome. I think this is the next one. I'm going to leave it alone.
Can of worms.
Good afternoon, Commission. Mike Hogan, Public Affairs Administrator. Today I'm pleased to welcome Ben Buchholz. Ben is one of our contract lobbyists in Olympia. Plays a really important role for the port, being the eyes and ears down and tracking all the issues that we follow. Some we're playing offense, some we're playing defense. McBride and Associates, who Ben works for, is also the shared lobbyist with the city and the county, and that's a really important partnership. I think it's good for our elected officials. They've really appreciated it, being able to narrow in on our joint priorities, and it's also been a good relationship builder among the city and the county and the port. So at any rate, Ben's here to give you an update on what to look forward to in the upcoming session. We'll be down there, of course, in a couple of weeks and a number of times, and lots of issues, lots of things going on. So Ben's here to give you a preview.
All right, good afternoon. Thanks, Mike, for that introduction. As he said, my name is Ben Buchholz, and I know all of you very well, so we won't get stuck on that. I just wanted to echo some of the things that Mike said about the joint approach between the county, the city, and the port from the perspective that we see it in Olympia. And with the elected officials and members of the legislature, we feel it is a great benefit to all be on the same page, to have select objectives that we can put on one list. Each entity has what they're pushing for, but it's a one-pager. I'm sure you've all seen it when you were down visiting members in Olympia. And it's a clear message for anybody that we meet with. It has the logos of each group on there, and makes it much more simple for members in Olympia to understand what we're asking for. So that works out really well. It's also a bit of a price break on the contract, so that's good for you guys. And I just want to say that we have appreciated the work over the years. I was trying to remember when we started. I couldn't, but time flies when you're having fun, I guess. So it's been at least 5 or 6, I think. So just real quick, I'll try to keep this pretty short. The legislative session starts on Monday, January 13th. It's scheduled for 60 days. It'll be a short, what we call a short session. Longer sessions are 105 days. Those are full budget writing years. This will just be a supplemental budget year. So 60 days, scheduled to end on March 12th. And in a supplemental year, basically it was defined as being a time to just fill holes that the legislature missed on a full budget writing year. So it has evolved over time, though, to become much more of a not just filling holes that they missed, but even adding some financing and funding for projects that they realized during the interim they wanted to fund. So it also has grown into being a policy type session. Obviously, long sessions are where the majority of the work on policy bills get taken care of, but short sessions have become just sort of part of the beast of session, that everybody has something that they'd like to work on. So policy bills have become a pretty good chunk of what happens during a short session. Just an example for everybody to take home with them, on a long session year, we'll see 3,000 to 4,000 bills introduced, policy bills introduced. In a short session of 60 days, we'll see anywhere between 1,500 and 2,500 bills introduced. So quite a few pieces of legislation to track and to monitor, and like Mike said, play offense when we can and play defense when we have to, and hopefully the outcome is what we want it to be. The governor released his proposed budget, supplemental budget, on December 18th. And the governor's budget is always the first budget released. It comes out in December, always comes out in mid-December. The House and Senate will release their proposed budget somewhere in the second or third week of February. Sort of depends on all the pieces that have to go together for what time it will come out. And once their budgets are released, then they will start to negotiate the different pieces from the House and the Senate. So the goal is to have a budget that is negotiated, hopefully at least 2 or 3 days before March 12th. Final votes usually are taken a day before or the day of adjournment. I'm just going to touch on some of the major issues that we'll see dealt with this session. And this is more sort of big picture so that you can understand what they'll be dealing with in the legislature and why they're dealing with that issue. And obviously the The biggest one that we're all aware of is Initiative 976 passing the $30 car tab fee. And the reason that's important is because, as you've probably read in the paper already, we're looking at in 2020 a $440 million deficit for the transportation budget. So we've been told by leadership already that will consume a large portion of their time in Olympia this session. So they will be having to deal with that budget hole. And how they're going to do that, I met with House and Senate transportation budget writers, and they are going to come up with a new budget that basically cuts 10% across the statewide, 10% off transportation projects that were to be funded. And they will put that into a separate bill, into a separate budget. Depending on how the state Supreme Court rules, they will either implement that, so the cuts are effective, but if the state Supreme Court rolls back the vote on 976, then that budget will be terminated at that point. So, homeless and affordable housing.
Ben, quick question.
Yeah.
When do we expect the Supreme Court to address?
We're being told it'll probably be somewhere April or May is when we're expecting that. And if you have any other questions, go ahead and
Yeah, I do on the.
jump in. Yep.
I love the reduction in number of bills being produced by shortening the session. Any of those proposals to take the session to maybe 30 days and cut the bills to 500?
Well, it's interesting you ask that question because it seems like every year we hear some sort of chatter about going to a year-round session. So I think that's the opposite end of the spectrum. So not what you were looking for.
Close.
Right.
You want Nevada where they meet every other year.
They're not even meeting off years.
Nope.
So, the next issue that I think will be made a priority, given the makeup of the Senate and House chambers, I think you'll see a lot of time put towards homelessness, homeless issues, and services surrounding the homeless population. As we all know, I mean, you read the paper anywhere in this state now, Spokane, Tri-Cities, any corners of the state, everybody's dealing with a homeless population and the services that need to be provided for those folks. And in the governor's budget, and I should preface maybe the governor's budget with the fact that that's just one proposal. And in previous years, it has been a proposal that maybe isn't thrown away, but it's also just a starting point. Probably is the better way to say that. It's just a place to start, and the House and Senate come up with their own ideas. So don't think that when I mention the governor's budget, that's what we're going to end up seeing, because it'll look very different from what he proposed.
You talk a little bit more about services. Are there anything about capital? Because it seems to me that capital and construction costs are probably going to be paramount. Is that a part of this?
Yeah.
Or is it all services?
That's right. Definitely. You're absolutely right. So in the governor's budget, there's about $300 million of additional funds that he would like to see put towards low-income housing, some sort of services for folks to get help that they need to sort of curtail some of the problem that we're seeing. So yes, capital construction projects are going to be a big chunk of what we're seeing proposed this session.
When you say help services, is there anything in there about the state reinstating the mental institutions that they took away? To take care of that?
I do believe the governor's budget at least touched on additional beds and room for mental health services. Off the top of my head, I can't recite to you what the numbers were.
It is in there somewhere.
Yeah, yep. And I can definitely, anything I can't answer today, we'll get you information on. So, another issue that I think we'll see a lot of time spent on this session will be environmental issues. everything from low carbon fuel standards, which is Representative Joe Fitzgibbons had a bill last session, House Bill 1110, which would basically promote the use of a cleaner burning fuel. And over time, I think it basically raises the cost of fuel somewhere between 50 and 70 cents, depending on the blend, over the next decade. So I think you'll see that bill moved. It's sitting in the Senate as of right now, where it was left at the end of last session. I think personally, you'll probably see that bill move the first or second week of session. That'll be one of the first major pieces of legislation that gets a vote or a committee hearing.
Did you say 50 to 70 cents per gallon? Is that what you
Correct,
said?
over 10 years, yep. And then some sort of carbon tax. I won't say specifically what we think that'll be. Potentially, it could be a cap and trade program, something that we're seeing similar from California, Oregon, and BC. Some sort of metric ton tax, and then a market where you could exchange credits in the open market. Senator Reuven Carlisle has sort of been the champion of cap and trade, or cap and invest, as he likes to call it. So I think you'll see a fair amount of time given to that proposal also this year. Capital gains tax. That's another issue that we saw the last 3 or 4 years. And given the new makeup of the House, capital gains was getting stuck in the House chamber without a floor vote. We now have a new speaker, Representative Lori Jenkins from Tacoma. She replaces Frank Chop from Seattle. He was there 20 years, and this will be her first year as speaker. And there's a good chance, I think, that you'll see some of those issues that have been held onto because of the amount of votes, the numbers that they needed to get it off the floor. I think you'll see some of those bills actually move this session, and capital gains could potentially be one to help backfill holes that have been created by transportation funding. So I'm going to touch briefly, and then I'll let you guys ask questions, but I'm going to touch briefly on the fact that I've mentioned several times the makeup of the House and Senate chambers. The reason that's important is because in the Senate, it's 28 Democratic members to 21 Republican members. In order to stop anything in the Senate, you have to be able to get at least 4 votes to switch sides. So you'd have to get 4 Democrats to come over to the Republican side. That is getting to be more and more difficult, as we've seen in the last few years. Not impossible to do, but it is becoming more difficult, just given the politics of where these folks are elected, what districts they're coming from. It's getting much more difficult. In the House, you're getting close to a supermajority, 57 to 41. That's almost, it's very difficult to stop something coming out of the House if the Democrats want to pass that, just given the fact that they have so many extra seats over the Republicans. So with a new speaker, the energy is different. It's the youngest House members that we've ever had on average. It's the most female House members we've ever had. So it sort of mirrors the state, exactly how the politics in the state are going right now. So, and as we all know, Representative Jeff Morris has retired from his seat after 22 and a half years to take a job with Schneider Electric. And as you probably read in the paper, there was an appointment yesterday afternoon with Alex Rammel, and so he'll be the newest member of the legislature this year. So, and then I'll sort of leave it there. From the legislative objectives sheet, we will be on offense when we can be, and we'll be on defense some of the time. But MACA, always a priority for us, for the port. So wherever we can push there to make sure they don't, to emphasize on MACA, it is do not move any money from that fund. So that is the number one thing that we'll be asking for. And then rural broadband, wherever we can work on that, if there's changes coming down policy-wise, whatever we can do to keep pushing that forward, that's on the list too. So clean energy, housing affordability, fiscal sustainability, making sure that the port gets its fair share of tax collections across the state, and then criminal justice and social services. So it's a big agenda for this session. Being 60 days, it's a lot to do. But you know, we'll be monitoring all of those bills that are introduced, all 1,500 to 2,500 of them, and we always send that report each week so that you can take a look at what's being introduced and what to watch for. So I'll leave it at that. If you have any questions for me, I'm happy to try to answer them.
Any other indications about the new speaker, her priorities?
Yeah, so I've met with the new speaker, Lori Jenkins from Tacoma, and she's very open and honest about the fact that the Democratic Party has helped her and her family to succeed, and she's made it quite clear that the goal is that if her caucus, the Democratic caucus, has enough votes to move certain pieces of legislation, she will not stop those from going to the floor. So in previous years, there has been maybe a feeling that leadership sometimes would put their foot on things. I think you will see sort of a change in that attitude going forward. I think you will see more vote counts just being taken in caucus. If they have the votes, it's going to go to the floor. So, and that's why monitoring all of these introduced pieces of legislation is so important just on the spot, because you need time to be able to try and change something that maybe isn't as good as it for you as it could be. So that's one of the first places that we can make a difference as a team in Olympia is as soon as something's introduced, if it's not how we like it, we need to get to work to amend it so that we are okay with it at a minimum.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys. Thanks for the time. Appreciate it.
Actually, I've got one real quick one that I just thought of. Hey, Ben, real quick. Where do you see the status of the per mile tax?
I think and this is me stepping out on a limb probably here a little bit, but I think that would be a pretty thick branch. But so I think we're eventually headed there. And how soon will be the question. I think it's not if we're headed there. I think it's how soon. I don't think you'll see that this year. I will tell you, though, when I met with Senator Steve Hobbs, who is the lead budget writer, chair of the Transportation Committee in the Senate, he said he is prepared to run a new gas tax package next year during the long session. So I think you could see some pay by mile tax there. So it may be in the near future.
You think it'll start voluntary, or you think it'll be imposed on
That I
certain,
don't know.
certain vehicles?
No, I mean, with any voluntary program, it may not be an accurate representation of who should be paying. So I'm not sure it'll be voluntary the first year.
Thank you.
Yep.
How's it gonna work when everybody comes in from out of state? How are they gonna get charged?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's tons of questions about how it'll be implemented.
They come down from the east and they're driving all over here and they go back, they don't pay per mile.
They don't pay today. They wouldn't pay then, they wouldn't pay today, right? You're trying to replace the license tab fee with a more fair, because electric cars don't pay gas tax, so you're trying to get rid of the gas tax and the,
Electric cars end up paying an extra car tab fee.
do they?
Yeah. I have one. It was a surprise.
Is that for your bike or?
The car, because you're not buying gas, so you're not paying into the gas tax, so they,
I think it's an extra $200, right? Is that right?
Yeah, I thought it was 175 or 200, somewhere around there, that you get as part of your registration.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I looked at it, I called them, I said, I got an electric car because I thought I was doing a good thing here. What am I getting charged extra? But I got explained, it's for the gas tax, and that's how the state highway is funded, so, yeah, it makes sense.
And I sort of forgot to mention it, but I have been talking to Mike about dates for you guys to come down to Olympia to meet with the delegation and leadership. So I always encourage everybody to come down as often as possible. And, you know, we set up meetings with the delegation and with leadership and governor's folks and et cetera. So that's always a very valuable piece of the messaging to see folks from in-district come down and advocate for what they want.
And just for the record, Ports Day is on the 28th, so we will be down there on January 28th.
All right, thank you for the time. Appreciate that very much.
Thank you.
Right, that brings us to our action items. Action item.
Authorize the Port Commissioners to approve the transfer of capital improvements project CIP funds from GL number 228-811 to GL number 228-810 to implement the railway crossing improvements at Harris Avenue.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Brian Keenan, Project Engineer. You may recognize this presentation. It's partially what I provided to you back in April, I believe. But just want to take this moment with this action item, just provide a quick update on the two railway crossings. Feel free to ask questions if you have any. So again, the two crossings the port is involved with are the Fairhaven Quiet Zone. We've got 3 crossings. The city has 2. And here's an updated slide to show the current anticipated schedule. I believe the city is still working with BNSF to secure an agreement to complete the Bayview Drive project. The Harris Avenue crossing project, we've received the bids, 7 good bids. Low bid was $276, and we're looking to award that contract after this reallocation of the budget. Alaska Ferry project, that one is still being evaluated by BNSF. We updated our design, that quad gate crossing proposal, and tweaked the pedestrian crossing improvement. So that's the status of that one. Still looking for BNSF feedback as to what the costs and maintenance fees would be on that crossing improvement. But we're hopeful in 2020 to potentially get both of those wrapped up. We have, we think, adequate budget to complete both. And that's the current state of it now.
Do you have a question?
Oh, maybe they're going to explain that here now. What would you say the Harris Avenue was how much?
The low bid?
Yeah.
The low bid was $276 and change.
In the 700 or something when we started?
Sorry.
What was the high end on that when we first started the project? Wasn't it the 700 neighborhood?
It's evolved over time. We've got a $350,000 grant that's partially funding the project.
Right.
But through the design process and working with the different agencies, it's grown a bit. Currently, we're looking at 650 to 700 all in.
For Harris?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're right as the original numbers we thought.
Yeah, so the bid was just the construction, that didn't include the engineering and all the soft costs.
That's what I was going to, holy cow, how'd we go downhill that far?
Yeah.
It was a good thing, but now it's not so good.
I started thinking we had a budget surplus there when you said that.
Wow, okay.
So this slide will look pretty similar to the last presentation, just maybe cover the highlights here. But I mentioned the grant. We've got a 10% match there. This CIP 228-210 will fund the remainder of it. Let's see, and this again it's not a quad gate. It's the non-mountable medians, the passive improvements. What did change is a BNSF request that we install pedestrian signals and flashers. It was not originally anticipated in this project. but that did add to the cost of the project. But it's, we think, a good pedestrian safety measure. So anticipate we'll be fully completed at Harris Avenue in Q1 2020. And then for moving forward to the Alaska Ferry Railway crossing, the updated budget is 1.8 million. I think that's more than we probably need. But again, I'm looking for that feedback from BNSF as to what the costs would include. But based on what we currently understand, we feel like we've got adequate budget there. That's why we're asking to move from this where we think we're flush into Harris Avenue to cover the difference. And then maybe just to wrap it up here, this slide really hasn't changed, but if you're curious about the process, right? So we complete the improvements at all the crossings in the quiet zone, so that's city and port crossings. BNSF would certify the crossings meet the quiet zone requirements. City submits a notice of quiet zone establishment. BNSF establishes the quiet zone no earlier than 21 days after the notice is submitted. And then after the quiet zone is established, the trains would only sound their horns when there's something out of the ordinary. So that's kind of a quick update on where we're at. Do you have any questions? Any more questions?
I wondered, $350,000 for the design, was that just for Harris Street alone?
Harris Ave. So it involved quite a bit of between working with BNSF, Federal Highways, the city. There's a lot that went into this design than we originally anticipated.
Lots of different versions. So every time we had to go back to the engineering company, we got a new bill, and they came and said, okay, we want pedestrian signals. Then we had to go design pedestrian signals, and that was kind of the MO the whole way through. Every time BNSF came back with a change, we had to go to the engineers and redesign it.
And BNSF didn't put any money in on the design changes, right? I think
You already know the answer to that.
Have they been any more responsive? Sounds
Yes.
like
Yes.
you're still waiting.
They have been.
But we've seen some motion and improvement there.
Dramatic increase in improvement in their response time. So at least for me, I believe you've probably experienced similar.
Yeah, so just recently on both projects, so let's see, today, Executive Director Rob Fix signed the agreement for the Harris Avenue crossing. So that's being sent to BNSF right now. That's needed for the implementation. Getting through that there was some back and forth, but we've got that underway and secured as soon as they sign that. And then for the Alaska Ferry crossing, it's a little bit of back and forth, tweaking the design, making sure that it's a project that we're comfortable with and BNSF is comfortable with.
One more question. What's our time frame on this stuff? When are we looking at completion?
Yeah, so for the Harris Ave crossing, that'll be completed this Q1,
Okay.
I anticipate. The construction should actually move pretty quickly. BNSF's work to install the new pedestrian flashers, that'll be completely separate from our Public Works contract that is in the action here. And we're fortunate where those two improvements are decoupled, really. We don't have to clamber over one another to get the work done. So that's Harris Avenue.
So what do we project for?
Oh, the quiet zone altogether?
Yeah, on our part of it.
On our part of it. So next steps for the Alaska Ferry crossing are for BNSF to provide the construction estimate to convert that 2-gate crossing into a 4-gate crossing. And if it's something that we feel we can work with, then we'd move forward to complete that project. I think that could be done in 2020, but want to make sure we understand what costs are ahead of us to go that route.
And then our industrial park one, where are we at?
Yeah, the private crossing at Seaview.
Yes.
That's the understanding from a couple years back was that the city will be installing signage was the only required thing there identified earlier. And there's an agreement between the port and the city that the city would install that signage as part of the Bayview Crossing improvements.
They have to do Boulevard Park, and when they do Boulevard Park, they'll come in and put our signage up, and that meets the requirement. There's no lights or no gates or anything needed there because it's a private crossing.
Okay, so for our part to be done there, we gotta wait for them to get Bayview done.
Yeah, but the quiet zone isn't implemented until they get Bayview done.
All of them completed, yep.
Yeah, Bayview is part of the Fairhaven zone, so until they do theirs, it's not a quiet zone anyway.
Yep.
But you have them on track for hopefully 2020 for the Bayview?
Now, that's a city project. Last I spoke to the city, they mentioned that they're still working on getting their agreement with BNSF finalized. So, I would hope that that would be done this year. It's hard to imagine it would stretch out much further.
And this Alaska Ferry one is so expensive because we're doing these quad gates, and we haven't been able to find a more cost-effective method that's acceptable.
We if I speak out of turn, please correct me, but we put $1.8 million in the budget, but BNSF has not told us that it's $1.8 million, so we're hopeful it's going to come out quite a bit lower than that. We put $1.8 million in there to be conservative, make sure we didn't have to come back and get more money. So that's what we're waiting to hear back from, is what that final number is going to be.
After we do the construction, is the operation and maintenance on them? Or that falls on us as well?
No, that's one of the things we're waiting for on the quad gates, is how much is this going to cost us to maintain every year?
Because we own it.
Correct.
Well, yeah, so we'd be requesting that improvement. It's BNSF's equipment, so we pay to install it, and we pay for them to maintain it, is what the agreement is. It's on their property, it's their equipment.
What a sweet ordeal.
Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, why is it BNSF isn't working on our projects together? Why are we time framing apart like this? I mean, we get this one over here, and now we're gonna talk about, why aren't we doing this at the same time?
They'll tell you it's lack of engineering staff support. They just don't have enough engineers to get through to approve these things, yeah. We've got one engineer that,
Probably afford to hire a couple more because we're paying all the bills. Right. Holy cow.
Coming back to the 1.8 for the Alaska Ferry Crossing improvement, we have information from really the city. They've seen these quad gate projects come in from 600 to 1.2, I believe is what they've expressed to me. Where the costs vary quite a bit is whether or not they need to install new equipment, a new bungalow, all the signal related pertinences. So it's really across the board. It's hard to say you go from a 2-gate to a 4-gate, it costs you this much. But we think we're covered.
Kind of like the ones that just had the X and the sign on them that just flashed, and if you didn't stop, it was your deal.
That
So
works.
there's-
That works if you can live with the horns. So
there's, on the quad gates, there's sensory equipment inside there that if a car gets stuck, it opens the gate so that they can get out, and that's the biggest expense. You don't have that with the 2 gates because the car can get out anyway.
right. So yeah, I'm hopeful that we're done in 2020, but we've got a few steps ahead of us to go.
We'd like this one behind us.
Yeah. No animosity toward you at all. This is.
Understood.
I'm so frustrated with the railroad in general across this country. What they do to the people of this country is criminal, in my opinion. But so, thank you for what you're doing. You've done a good job. Thank you for the
Thank you. Appreciate it.
information.
Any other questions?
I'm amped up enough, that's good.
Authorize the Port Commissioners to approve the transfer of capital improvements project CIP funds from GL number 228-811 to GL number 228-810 to implement the railway crossing improvements at Harris Avenue.
Commissioner Bell?
Yes.
Commissioner Briscoe?
Yes.
And Commissioner Shepard is yes as well. Passes 3-0.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you very much. All right. I've neglected to read our advisory committee scheduled meetings earlier, so I'll read them now. We have 3 coming up. There's the Marina Advisory Committee, or the MAC, Tuesday, January 14th, 2020 at 6 p.m. in Commission Chambers. Technical Advisory Committee, the TAC, Thursday, January 16th, 2020 at 9:30 a.m. in the ARF Conference Room at 2005 West Baker View Road. And the Bellingham International Airport Advisory Committee, or the BIAC, which will meet at Thursday, January 16, 2020 at 5 p.m., also in our conference room, 2005 West Bakerview. Okay. Yeah, I guess we have other business and public comment. Other business?
Yeah, I have a couple things.
Okay.
One is that I'd like to speak to the new web locker in Blaine. I was in them, I was in the lockers actually today. Andy took me on a little bit of a tour. I'd like to say to staff and construction company, it was a job well done. It's something, that area there is cleaned up. It's something that the port and the public can be proud of that they own. The trail is great. A lot of people over the holidays were using it, pretty excited about it. We've got a long ways to go up there in that area, but what's been done so far is very, very well put together. The other thing is, and I've touched on this before, is interaction with our agricultural community in the county. We need, I still say we need some kind of liaison person. We need a contact person with the ag community, in my opinion, that we're getting information on how we can address their concerns and help them out there. And I think as us three commissioners, we need to figure out how we want to see that. You know, who do we contact? You know, is it Brad Rader? Or who do we contact?
There's a number of different groups out there. There's the Farm for Life. Yeah, Farm Friends is one. Farm for Life is Brad Rader. There's a number of groups out there, I think.
There's the Whatcom Conservation District.
Yep.
Right, so how do we get one person that represents all of those people's, because we can have, you know, Raider Farms come to us and tell us one thing. I mean, we've seen this all before. How do we get, and maybe Don has some ideas, how do we get that one person that's a contact point of how we can help?
Personally, what I'd like to see is if we have an interest in that, we go, one of us goes to sit on those committees, as we would, say, the Economic Development Committee. I mean, there's enough established committees that all we need to do is show up. And I think we can just find the one that we feel is the most important for us to be at, and select one of us to go be a part of that committee. I think that would be probably the most efficient and most effective
We
way.
need to do something. You know, we said we were gonna get this kind of off the ground.
Yeah, and
Why don't Don and I put a list together of those committees that are out there? We'll try and visit them and then bring back to you all what the opportunities are for you to get on one of those boards. I work very closely with the Farm for Life folks. I don't spend as much time with the Farm Friends folks. I think Don's group has met with them in the past. But if you all want to be part of those committees, that'd be, I'm sure, welcomed by them. So we'll put together a list of who they are and try and get key contacts
yeah,
for
and the
you.
county's got a farm advisory committee, and maybe that's something where we could just be a part of that committee as well. And they advise the Planning Commission on issues, so it's a pretty rich group.
As well as we're on YouTube, I'd ask the agricultural community, if you're watching this, to please, you know, come forward with ideas and help us figure out how we can have an ear to the ground, so to speak, out there in the East County and the agricultural community and help them.
Yeah. Another idea, if you wanted to, we could hold a work session, particularly on this topic, where we invited a range of groups to come and present to us about what they do, how they see our ability to help their missions, and for us to just have a longer, more dedicated conversation on this.
And along those lines, maybe we could invite all the advisory panels or groups all to come at once and tell us what they'd like to see us do, and we can maybe progress from there for a.
Yeah, I think the only problem I have with that is that there's just so many committees. And starting a new one,
No, I wasn't speaking to Star Noon. Tell us how we can
just maybe a
have all of them in
one-time
one room
event.
and give their ideas on how we can do that. Maybe that's an answer to it.
I think there's a lot of value in those kind of focused conversations that we're able to have on a specific topic. We don't have to have anything we're voting on in a work session, but it does give us time to meet as a group.
And that's all I have.
Okay.
Just to make sure I got that last one, we're suggesting a special meeting where we bring in a bunch of community committees to kind of tell us what they expect of the port.
I think it would be agricultural focus, yes.
Okay.
So look for some representative of some agricultural interests in the county about ways that the Port of Bellingham could help them be as successful as possible.
Thank you.
Commissioner Bell?
I have nothing.
Okay. And my only issue is to remind everyone that our next meeting will be starting again at 4 o'clock, which is our new starting time, but it will be on Wednesday, January 22nd, which is a change from our regular Tuesdays, and that's going to be our only Wednesday meeting that we will be at the year. And we're all going to do our best to make sure that Commissioner Bell makes it
Wednesday,
here.
the 22nd.
Of this year. Yeah, we'll be here.
You do that.
Okay, we've got no one signed up for our 5:30 public comment. Is there anyone here who wishes to speak?
Oh, come on, going once.
Okay, well, I hope everyone survives. It looks like we're having some wind out there. I'm excited about all the snow that has been happening at Mount Baker. We were up there on Sunday and it was just dumping. They've got a lot more in store, which is good for our summer water season and the amount of water we have in our drainage areas, and also for some winter play. So,
It's not
enjoy.
good for work productivity,
Maybe not good for work productivity.
at least mine anyway.
And a little bit harsh on the pump track too,
yeah.
probably, but we will deal.
And I know this is out of character, but go Hawks.
Oh, there we go. All right,
hard.
well,
Well done, Mr. President.
we're adjourned.